Norgon, if you don't know, is my religion. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Yarn to Table. I'm Celeste, and I have my little cat Augie just out of frame getting head scratches. And this is a show about my knitting life. Today I have two finished objects to share, and I have a couple works in progress, one of which I've started working on again recently, and the other two you have not seen at all yet. So, well, I guess the first thing I should share is the finished object that I'm wearing. So this is my Sunset Highway, of course, by Caitlin Hunter, and longtime viewers will know that I started this way back in March. I think this was my project that I only worked on while recording my auditory podcast, Return to Stars Hollow, which wrapped up the week of Thanksgiving. When it wrapped up, I literally was like on the last row of the body, or the bind off or something like that on the body. So I knit the sleeves, which have these cute little, for some reason it reminds me of like a hockey jersey. I don't know why, but in a good way. Anyway, I knit the sleeves in the week following Thanksgiving and made them sort of 3/4 length, and now it is done. So this was my like Stars Hollow themed project. That's why I had it as a special treat for when I was recording Return to Stars Hollow, because all of the yarns are themed after Gilmore Girls. So this darker shade was a Woolberry Fiber Co. club yarn called the Bracebridge Dinner. Then the brighter pink is a Homespun House Club color called the Pop-Tart Dilemma. This light pink, which is also on the sleeves, this very pale pink, is a regular from Stress Knits. It's the only regular in here. And it also has a bit of a sparkle to it, and that's I Smell Snow. And then the body is in this mint, which was another Woolberry Fiber Co. club called Bjork Snow Girl. Oh my god, I totally lied. This is not the Bracebridge Dinner. This is called It's Magical. Either way. So they're all kind of snowy and Gilmore Girls related colorways, and I really think it creates almost a Christmas sweater look with the slight nod toward a Scandinavian, albeit much more modern with the swoops, but a sort of slight nod toward a Scandinavian style yoked sweater. And then the reds and greens, even though they're sort of more modern, he's about to jump, so that's going to be a thump, just so you know. Sort of reds and greens, even though they're not the in-your-face, like forest green and bright holly jolly red, I still think it has a bit of a Christmassy vibe, and that is something that I'm really enjoying because it is December. So this is officially the holiday special episode. I don't know how holiday-ish my projects are, as I'm not a big gift knitter, but of course I have my Christmas sweater. The next thing I'm going to show you is technically one of my husband's Christmas gifts, although I gave it to him super early. And I also have an Advent skein project that I'm working on. So a little bit Christmassy anyway. Speaking of Christmas, I am doing Vlogmas right now. And so that's going to continue obviously through the 25th. But I did want to announce up front, and jumping back into the announcement section, I did want to announce that I'm going to be traveling for pretty much the whole month of January, off and on, but it's going to be, you know. So the next regular episode will probably post sometime in early February. However, I am planning on creating and releasing some bonus content in January. I'd like to create a sweater knitters tag and a fiber story video kind of just telling you my history about knitting that I thought would be some fun sort of tag videos that would fill the gap. I can pre-record them, and I think they would be really cool and like a fun thing that other people could take part in and do as well. Also, an announcement, well, not an announcement, but something I forgot to say up front is that you can follow me on Instagram and Ravelry as Celeste Foal, and that you can go to my projects pages to see all the details about any of the projects I'm working on in terms of what the yarns are, because I don't always tell you all the colorway names and stuff, just because I think there's more interesting things to talk about most of the time. And there's a group, a Yarn to Table group, which is where you can find show notes for every episode, and that is linked in the doobly-doo. Okay, is that it? Yeah, I said all the things. Okay, so I talked about this. I'm loving it. It's very outside my comfort zone in terms of just how much is going on, and also how handmade it looks, I guess. When you do a sweater with this sort of speckly bits of the hand-dyed yarn, I think that it tends to look less like a store-bought sweater, I guess, which is great, but it's also, I guess it's just more noticeable. I don't know how to say what I'm saying. I have a very minimal style typically, and so this is very out there, which is another reason why I think it's feeling very much like a fun, festive Christmas sweater, because I'm loving it, but it's also very different than my normal kind of neutrals and solids and like easy wearable pieces. But yeah, I have talked a ton about this on previous episodes, and now I guess there's just nothing left except to admire it in all of its beauty. So yeah, it's just it fits like a dream, which is great because I kind of threw caution to the wind a little bit with that in terms of knitting it at a weird gauge and choosing a weird size and wanting it to be a little bit more fitted than Caitlin Hunter writes it in the pattern. And it just all kind of worked out amazingly. Oh, I know something I want to talk about is the color work. So I've learned that I really need to go up at least one needle size when I do color work in order to keep it from getting too tight. I didn't do that on the yoke, and luckily with some aggressive blocking, it's basically completely fine. But I did go ahead and do that on the sleeves. I did, and you know, it's a little fiddly to have to switch your needles out just for this, and then switch back for this part, and then switch your needles again, and then switch back, and then switch your needles for the cuff. But I think it's worth it in the end. The sleeves did not take, they didn't really need any kind of aggressive blocking in order to keep these parts from getting too tight where the color work was. And so it's a lesson worth learning. I also started weaving in my ends like halfway through this project, and that was quite nice because there's lots of different color and stuff going on. So, and that also is really nice when you're changing colors for the color work to be able to weave in your ends as you go. So that's a technique that I learned like halfway through knitting on this sweater, and boy is it great. And also, so I learned the technique from Fruity Knitting from a patron-only tutorial, but if you are not a patron of Fruity Knitting, my good friend Melissa, who just released an extremely popular scrappy blanket called the Northeasterly, she has released a tutorial. I haven't watched it, but I'm assuming it is the same technique that I use for weaving in ends as you go. So you should check that out if you are interested. I will try to remember to link it in the doobly-doo, if not at least put it in the show notes. Anyway, or just ask me if it's not there and I will find it for you. yeah, so I guess that's all I have to say about the sweater. The other finished object is this hat, which doesn't look like much, but I assure you it's magnificent. So I was working on this last time, and this is the Mawson by Jared Flood, and it's a hat that I made for my husband. I made it out of Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in their cast iron, so it's like an almost black with some nice little tweedy bits. And it is a 1x1 rib, but it was a joy to knit just because I love the yarn so much. I used a cable cast on, which is just a wonderful cast on that almost looks like a tubular, but it's not quite as much trouble, and it also doesn't have that double layer effect of a tubular, so it doesn't have the flare that can sometimes be trouble with a tubular cast on, especially if you have a looser gauge. And I know this doesn't look like much, like why do you even need a pattern, but I have to tell you that the decreases are so brilliant. This hat is actually entirely reversible. You can see how beautiful those decreases look in the 1x1 ribbing, and they look exactly the same on the other side. And the reason for that is that the decreases are written for to be invisible in the 1x1 rib and also to be reversible. So essentially what you do is you come around and you do like a 1x1 cabling thing that ends up moving your knit and your purl so that when you do a decrease, it's two knit stitches that are going together, which makes it invisible for the 1x1. And then in addition to that, you're doing a decrease along with slipping something that when you come back, you decrease the one that you slipped and you slip the one that you decrease. But the one that you're decreasing now, you're doing something that looks like a decrease on the inside, so that you have this like inside facing decrease and this outside facing decrease, and then they just come together and cover each other. It's similar to a technique that I have seen, although not tried myself, but I really want to, for double-sided cables, which I saw on Fruity Knitting. But essentially, by using the ribbing and the natural ability for the hat to want to kind of pull together, you're able to create, through this sort of slightly complex decreasing, but it's all the information that you need is in the pattern. And like I said, it creates this look that is just an absolute dream. And it's actually really fun to follow and kind of learn this new technique, and at the same time, like, sort of really see and understand for yourself what's happening as you're doing it. For me, it was just really inspiring and exciting. And even though each decrease was a little bit more complicated, after reading the instructions for the first few rounds of decreases, it had all clicked up there and I didn't need to keep consulting the instructions. So a little bit more complicated than your average hat in terms of how the decrease works. But if you are up for a challenge and if you love learning new techniques, I highly, highly recommend this. And it's also really, really great because if you want to knit something that is super simple because that's your style, or you need to knit something that's super simple because that's a loved one's style, as in this case, I wanted to do a hat with cables or something, but Ryan really just wanted a simple Watchman style cap. This is the perfect combination of really minimal style with some challenge for the knitter. So as a knitter, say you have a husband hat or whatever equivalent hat that needs to be really simple in its appearance, but you don't want to knit something that's super boring. You want to knit something that's fun. The challenge of these decreases, I think, is really gives you something a little bit extra. So definitely a huge fan of this. huge fan, and if I am not already just like the biggest Brooklyn Tweed fangirl, it's like over the moon now. Like I will just buy anything they sell me at this point. Like, I'm in. So that covers finished objects, and I have 3 whips to share with you. I'll share the kind of new exciting thing first. I mentioned the northeasterly scrappy blanket that Melissa designed, and that is what I have here. So as I think I'd mentioned before, I was planning on doing some more scrappy socks for Advent with my Advent minis because I signed up for the Stress Knits Advent calendar. And like the day before December 1st or something like that, Melissa released this pattern that she had just designed because she kind of had this brainwave and it all happened, and then she was like, oh, I got to get this out in time for Advent skeins. It then proceeded to explode all over Ravelry, which is great. I've talked about this before on Vlogmas, so I don't want to ramble on for too much, but essentially it is a completely brilliant way of using up mini skeins because you can use however much you want, minis, scraps, whatever, and it creates this beautiful mixed chevron situation. You can see this is my first column and I'm working on my second, that has a very Missoni look to it, I think. I had actually considered, and I think talked about in the past, that I might at some point want to turn scraps into like a crochet blanket, but only if it had like a nice zigzag look to it, because I think that the scrappiness combined with the chevron has that Missoni look that is just very much up my alley, more so than a traditional granny stripe blanket is. Because I feel like a granny stripe, I don't know, it's just a little bit 70s. And this just feels slightly more chic, slightly more sophisticated, I suppose. This also is a very different experience than a granny stripe. So a granny stripe blanket, as I've heard, is an incredibly mindless, meditative practice. Whereas this is a little bit more complex, even than like a vanilla sock, I would say. It involves, you know, slipping, decreasing in 2 directions, increasing in 2 directions, making sure you're placing your increases and your decreases and your little column in the middle in the right spots so that it doesn't start traveling. There's just a few things that are going on, and for me that's really nice. I like to have a project that is that middle ground between completely like mindless and really challenging. This is something where it's easily memorizable, but it gives you enough of something to do that I think it makes it a little bit more potato chippy. So yeah, if you are an intermediate or an advanced knitter and the kind of like incredibly mindless projects are not really your cup of tea, but you've been looking for a scrappy blanket, this is totally what you need to get on. If you're a beginner, but you are up for like a very slight challenge, you also can totally get on this. So it's really, I think it really appeals to a lot of different types of people. And although Melissa is my very dear friend, and I would probably say nice things about a pattern of hers, even if I didn't actually like it myself, I think that you can tell by the fact that I have already been working on it a ton and I changed my plans in order to make this, that I do sincerely, absolutely love this. Plus, everyone else and their mother loves it and is knitting it, so this probably isn't even the first time that you have heard about it. So yeah, highly recommend. Now what I'm doing, because I have the Stress Knits calendar, and let me show you. Of course, I have tons of minis that I have not added, that I've opened. And these are all like very much Stacy's colors, which I love. Really soft, beautiful, subtle things that kind of fade into each other. And I almost regret not planning like more of a fade project with them, because as you can see, they're all very similar. For this blanket, I didn't think just the minis. Well, I think just the minis would have been enough, but I really wanted to incorporate some other minis and scraps that I have. So these are some minis left over from last year's advent calendar, which I got from a homespun house, as well as just a couple miscellaneous things like, you know, a tiny little bit of leftover Dirty on Purpose from my Tenya, which I couldn't throw away because it's too precious. Things like that. So I thought if I had these all beautifully blending into each other and then other kind of bolder things just randomly inserted, or if I like used all of these and then I started using these, I just thought it would be too much of a mismatch. So I decided that what I was going to do is, instead of giving into my typical urge to like do all the skeins in exactly the right order that I opened them, I was just going to kind of improv and add anything as I wanted, and kind of just mix it up. So you'll see that like these are Stacy's Advent skeins, and then this is like a random leftover, back to Stacy, back to old leftovers, back to Stacy, old leftovers, and then these are all Stacy. This is a brief little interlude of some scraps. So yeah, so basically I wanted it to be a bit more of a mix, and so I'm kind of just adding as I go. I have not been able to work on it every single day of December, and I've not been able to like keep up, and that's okay. Like, I'm letting that be the case because right now my knitting time is really precious because it's slightly rare, and so I don't want to be dedicating it to anything that feels like an obligation. So I don't, if I tried to keep up on this, it would be the only thing that I was knitting in December, and I still probably wouldn't manage to keep up on it. And I have two other sweaters that I care about. So I've been kind of doing a little mix of things, and this is not so much going to be an Advent project as it is going to be just an ongoing additional scrappy project that I have kind of working on here and there. I have gone ahead and bound off my first column because I believe this is the size I want it to be. I have in mind that this could be a baby blanket, rather than trying to make a huge blanket. That is for a few reasons. For one thing, I am already working on a very large Cozy Memories quilt, and I'm also every now and then making hexapuffs for a beekeeper's quilt. And if I have 3 really large scrappy quilts going, I feel like I will never ever finish any of them because they're all just too much work. So I thought maybe I'll go with a baby blanket instead. Additionally, I have been wanting to knit ahead 1 or 2 baby blankets because, as I've mentioned before, I have this plan that if I knit some socks, baby blankets, and hats before I am actually expecting a child, that once I am expecting the child and I actually know when that due date is going to be, I can dedicate my time to knitting more garments, because garments are more dependent on due date because you want to keep the season in mind for how big the baby's going to be at that point. So I've knit tons of socks and like 1 hat, and some baby booties, but I still haven't ever gotten around to a baby blanket. And so since I wanted to work on this anyway because it looked so much fun, I thought, 2 birds, let me just make that a baby blanket. So that's the plan, and I think it is looking so cute so far. So yeah, lots of fun to work on, and just really nice to kind of play with color again It reminds me of when I worked on the Marled Magic, and it was just, again, like so far outside the kind of knitting that I usually do, in that there wasn't any planning and it was all these different colors, and that's kind of what's going on here again, which it's nice every now and then to mix it up with something like that. Okay, so the other two projects that I have are my sweaters. First, let me show you the one that's making a reappearance. This is in one of my very favorite bags by Peapod Threads with my cute little pins that I love. Peapod Threads, is that what it is? Yeah. I always feel like I'm saying the wrong name. So this is my swag. I don't know how long I had set this aside after I finished the body, but it feels like it had been at least a few weeks. And I picked it up the other day because I was like, I feel like knitting something different, and for some reason, like when you need to pick up the sleeves, like you shouldn't let yourself, or I shouldn't let myself set aside the sweater at that point, because then I never sit down to knit it because the first step is picking up the sleeves. If I would just go ahead and pick up the sleeves as soon as I finished the body, then I could just pick it up like any other knitting and just keep going. But sometimes they sit and languish for a tiny little bit because I need to pick up the sleeves. So anyway, here is the lovely thing. Body, 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 body. And I'm working on the first sleeve, and the first sleeve is actually almost, I think I've knit 9 rows of these little crisscrossy guys, and I'm going to knit 10, I believe, based on my calculations, before I start knitting the cuff, although the cuff is going to be quite long. It's like a 5-inch cuff. So they will be full-length sleeves. Right now they're already kind of long enough to be 3/4 length, but I want them to be full length because this is a woolly wool. So like this sweater is superwash, so it's really quite light. It's not that particularly warm. This sweater, although it's also fingering, and it even has this whole lace section, to me it feels like a slightly warmer sweater because it's made out of non-superwash wool, and so it's just a bit cozier. So yeah, I definitely want full sleeves on this guy. So yeah, I've just picked up a couple of times and knit this sleeve, and I'm almost to the cuff on it. I have a little Battenberg on here, which is so cute. I love that. Battenbergs, if you don't know, are like a British cake. And I'm probably saying it in a weird way because I'm an American. It's probably like Battenberg or something. They're always like putting a lot of T sounds and things. Battenberg. It's probably how you say it. Anyway, let's see. I feel like I've talked about this so much in the past, so I don't want to, say the same things again. I've talked about, if you're interested, how I'm using a combination of slipped stitches and 1x1 cables to do kind of my own thing for these crisscrossy guys, which I find to be faster and more enjoyable. And you may notice that although the pattern is written for kind of traditional superwash hand-dyed, and most people who have made this have made it with traditional superwash hand-dyed, this kind of yarn, I kind of wanted to do my own thing on this. So the yoke is beautiful hand-dyed, although it is hand-dyed on a non-superwash base. This is from Mad Fuzzy, big fan. And then the body is actually not a hand-dyed yarn. It is a more heathered yarn. I don't know if you can tell, but there's almost little bits of blue in there, heathered in there, which goes well with the blue speckles and the pink. And it is actually Jamieson's of Shetland. So it's a nice little contrast between the sort of hand-dye world and the more rusticy, tweedy, heathery world, which are both types of yarn that are very near and dear to my soul. And I loved the idea of finding two that kind of worked together because they were similar textures. So by using the Mad Fuzzy, which is a very, very similar non-superwash, two-ply, slightly farmy quality. I believe it's a, let me just actually read because I keep this around. Frisian. It's East Frisian wool. This, of course, is Shetland, but they are very, very, very similar bases. And so I'm able to kind of combine those worlds of the hand-dyed and the tweedy stuff without having like a mismatch in terms of the actual texture of the base. So I just think it's a really, really special combination. I'm kind of proud of myself for putting it together. I think it's like definitely a different take on the swag than anything that I have seen before. And that is really exciting for me because it's a way of kind of taking a sweater that is everywhere and sort of making it more my own, which is nice because a lot of the time I feel like I just knit things straight down the middle. Like I will see something and I'll fall in love with it in the yarn, in the colorway that it's designed in. And then if that's the case, I just go with that. I don't always feel the need to like put my own spin on things. A lot of times I just like them how they are. And I loved how this was as well, the regular way, but I had this Mad Fuzzy because it was a gift. And so that like inspired me to do something different. And I've just found it very rewarding to kind of experiment in that way, I guess. So anyway, now that I'm knitting on the sleeve, I'm suddenly like desperate to have this off the needles, not because I'm not enjoying it, I'm still enjoying it, but because I want to wear it really badly. I have heard a lot of people who knit this complain about how tedious the X's are on the body and sleeves. Many people omitting them simply because they don't enjoy knitting them, even though they like the look. For me, I think the look adds a ton to this design. The texture of the X's in combination with a little bit of color work and lace makes it just a completely unique sweater, unlike anything that I've ever seen anywhere else. I think it is really, really, really a beautiful part of the sweater. And if you are knitting it and you feel like you don't enjoy doing the X's, I cannot recommend enough considering swapping in twisted stitches, because for me, using a combination of cabling without a cable needle left and twisted stitch right, which I've talked about in the past in more detail, that has made it not only not tedious, but it's actually made it a very enjoyable knit where I can't wait to get to the next row because there's just enough interest going on. So it's made it just, I've done an entire body of these X's and most of the sleeve, and I'm like still enjoying that process. It is still fun, and when I get to the cuff, I'm going to be like a bit annoyed and ready to get through the ribbing because I want to get to the next sleeve so that I can do more of the X's. So it's taken something that might have been tedious and turned it into something that's super enjoyable. So just huge shout out to that idea as a possible modification if you're not super into the experience as is. Okay. Finally, I don't believe I started this last time. I think I just talked about it. This is my weekender, and it is in, boy, I just can't even. I love this bag. I know I talked about that last time, but I love this bag. I have a couple pins on here. I liked doing like a cute little neutral palette just to keep this bag like its chic little self. So I have my, what is it, Twig and, does it say on the back? Twig and something. Anyway, you probably know. and then my Brooklyn tweed and my Harvard bookstore. I think it's so cute. So this is my weekender. Now this was designed in Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in the narwhal marl, which is like a gray and white. I'm knitting it in the newsprint marl. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it so much. Like, I'm so excited about how it's going to look. I know I'm going to love wearing it because it's the drop shoulder construction with the boxy body is just everything I want to wear every moment. I'm already planning so many additional weekenders in my head. Like, I immediately need a mustard colored one. And I also think that I need a navy blue one. And then, like, obviously in addition to that, I would like a black one and a gray one and probably like 13 others because I just want to wear this sweater all the time. So this sweater, because what you're going for in the end is this lovely reverse stockinette texture with this column of slipped knit stitches going down the front and down the back, you actually knit it inside out so that you don't have to do all that purling. So I'm knitting it right now. This is the inside that you're seeing, which is actually stockinette. And when I get up to the top, it'll just kind of get turned inside out and it'll become this, if that makes sense. It's bottom up, and you start with the front and the back ribbing. So you have this split hem. So first you do like the front and then you do the back and then you join them all together. And so the back is just a little bit longer. All these ends are hard to show here. The back is just a little bit longer than the front, which I love that look. I actually did that as an alteration on the what was it called? Gosh, I'm totally losing my mind. The Ostra that I just test knit for Melody Hoffman. She actually was considering doing this as a design element and changed her mind, but I added it in because I just love this. So you do that. You do those with, you cast on with a tubular cast on, and that's the other thing that I just have to say. And I will try to remember to link to the tutorial and the doobly-doo, but the version of the tubular cast on that Andrea Mowry links to in the pattern has like changed my life because it is so much less fiddly and annoying than every other version of a tubular cast on that I have ever done. And it also helped click in my mind what's really going on with the tubular cast on. There's no need for a provisional cast on or anything annoying like that. It is just absolutely just the most simplified, easy to understand version of the cast on. If you've had trouble with the tubular in the past and you've kind of given up on it, but you are interested in, you know, like you wish you did it, I would definitely recommend trying it out. So that's been a huge boon already. Obviously, working with this yarn just makes my heart happy because it's my very favorite base and I just love the way it feels. And I'm just getting really, really excited to wear this. So I have not been working on it a ton. As I said, my knitting time's been kind of limited right now, and yeah, so it kind of, I feel like I'm in that black hole in the middle of the body of a sweater where it just seems like I'm making absolutely no progress, even though I know I am. Like, I think I'm at 10 inches or something, and I needed to get to 15 before I break for the front and the back, but I put my little, oh, this will tell me. It has it stamped on the back. Twill and Print. Twill and Print. That's the name of the company. I love her designs. Anyway, I have my little slow knitter progress keeper on here to remind me to be patient with myself. It will come along eventually. So, yeah. So that's what I'm knitting. On the horizon, I still earnestly intend to knit that stone cutter that I keep talking about and that I bought yarn for. I really do, guys. I just don't want to have too many things going at once. So I think what I'm going to do is try to finish up the Zweig, and then I can start on the stone cutter. I'm definitely not going to let myself start another different sweater. That's just not happening, although I desperately want to start the new Caitlin Hunter that's in the latest Pom Pom magazine, the one that Nora Gahn edited. Nora Gahn, if you don't know, is my religion. Like, I think she might be some kind of like goddess from the planet KALs that was sent here to just make everyone chic for some higher purpose. So I worship her, and I very recently discovered that Pom Pom magazine is like the absolute greatest thing in the world. I don't know why it took me so long to do that. I'm not big on magazines because I don't like paying for things that I'm not going to use. And so I don't like buying an issue if I'm not going to knit everything in it or multiple things in it. I don't like subscribing to something when I don't know if I'll like the next issue. But of course they got me with that Moon issue, right? So I bought the Moon issue because I was like, everything in here is gorgeous. I read it. It was amazing. It made me buy another issue because the stamps one, because I really loved the sweater on the front of it, and I thought, since I had so much fun just reading the Moon issue, I thought even if I only knit that sweater, I'll just enjoy having the issue. So I bought the stamps one. The stamps one has the most incredible article in the middle of it that's all about like why we call it continental knitting, when it's really technically like German, and the strange sort of colonialist perspective on like just a kind of British point of view on, you know, the language that we use to talk about knitting, sometimes in English, the language that we tend to use in America. Just completely incredible article, in addition to having these, just the beauty that's obviously in every issue. And then I saw that Nora Gahn was the guest editor for the latest one. So I was like, Pom Pom, you get me. So I just bought the Nora Gahn one and I just subscribed. I was like, there's no way that I'm not going to want every issue of this magazine at this point. Like, I figured it out. I've read other ones that people raved about. I bought like a super expensive copy of Len magazine that everyone loves, and it was fine. You know, nothing against it, but I never felt the need to like subscribe or anything. Pom Pom, I just feel like understands the depths of my soul and is just making exactly the magazine that I want to exist in the world. So now that I've wised up to that, I can slowly buy all of the back issues of it and subscribe and just fill my house with issues of Pom Pom Quarterly. So that's the plan. But anyway, I got on this sidetrack because I was saying that the new Caitlin Hunter sweater from the new Pom Pom, I don't remember what it's called, but I'll pop in a picture. It is taking every ounce of willpower to not immediately order yarn and cast that on because I want it. I told myself I was not going to do any more stranded color work, not until I improve my tension. It has stranded color work, and I don't care. I just, I want it. I want it now. I want it now. So that is to happen sometime soon, but not before the stone cutter. That's my rule. Not before the stone cutter. Stone cutter is happening. Yeah, so that's all my like sweater dream knitting. I feel like it's a bit of a misnomer that I call this section on the horizon because I never actually end up knitting the things that I talk about. I mean, I do, but not right away or in the right order or whatever. And then I cast on things or I find things that I never mentioned. So dream knitting is probably a more appropriate term, but as I usually do intend to knit those things, and I think of it more like plans than like dream knitting, that's what I call it. So the other thing that I'm resisting right now is the underwing mitts. I bought Shetland yarn, Jamieson's of Shetland Spendthrift yarn, the same base that I'm using for the swag. I bought it for them. They are a kind of slightly complex color work pattern. Of course, I don't want to work on them right now because, like I said, I'm trying to resist all of the stranded color work because I just get frustrated by how fumbly I am with stranded color work. But I want them really bad. Like I've just really, lately I've just been wanting them. I bought this yarn like last year with the plans to turn it into underwing mitts, and I have not been in the mood to cast them on. Now I'm in the mood to cast them on, but I'm resisting it. So I don't know if I should just go ahead and let myself do that or not. I doubt that they'll actually get finished if I do cast them on, and I don't know. I feel like I have other priorities. So it's just, do you guys wrestle with yourselves this much? I don't. Sometimes I feel like I'm crazy, that I like waste so much energy thinking about like what I should be knitting or what I'm gonna knit next. It's not really like a should thing. It's more just like there's only so much time, and if you are knitting one thing, you can't be knitting something else. And I'm just very aware of that, and I want to be smart about it. But sometimes I feel like I'm I waste too much energy worrying about it or thinking about it or sort of battling with myself. But at the same time, I am the kind of person who I can't be happy by just casting on anything whenever the whim arises. I know people that can be, and that's completely fine. I'm just a different personality type. I'm just a very regimented sort of obsessive person. So I just know myself. So anyway, end of therapy session. So yeah, I'm going to end it there because with Vlogmas and with the upcoming bonus content, I don't really think we need a chit-chat segment, so I think this is long enough. But thank you so much for stopping in for the holiday special, and happy knitting, and I will see you in the new year.